So Astralis have just won the ECS Season 8 Finals, and with that victory, they have won back-to-back titles for the first time since their era really came to an end in April of 2019. Of course, they had just won IEM Beijing coming into the ECS Finals, and so this is a big accomplishment for them, and I really feel like this marks the fact that Astralis is back. Maybe they're not, in another era, at least not yet. We'll have to see how the next, 6 months or so go. Maybe they can piece together a second era for themselves, but the point is that Astralis is back on the table. They are back as an elite-level team, probably ranked number one in the world. Really hard to see who else you could rank that way considering the recent results, how up and down EG have been, how Liquid's kind of fallen off a bit. Fnatic don't seem quite there yet. Same with the 100 Thieves. I don't think they've had enough elite results yet. So I think you really have to give it to Astralis here. And so it's really cool to see this recovery. It didn't really take too much. They didn't make any roster changes. They just kind of got their nose down to the grindstone, worked on themselves, became more active, started playing tournaments more regularly, got the ring rust off, innovated on a couple of different maps, and here they are. They're back in action, and it's really cool to see this, and wanted to kind of take this video to talk about how Astralis have reassembled, how they've come back onto the scene in a really big way. Obviously, they had their era that kind of stretched from the middle of 2018 into probably April, I think, of 2019 is probably pretty fair. So they had an era that lasted pretty much a year. I think they went to 19 LAN events. They made 15 finals, won 12 of those finals. They won 2 majors, only placed outside the top 4 a single time. That was their first event together. So, they were winning over 80% of their best of 3, best of 5 series. They had an over 79% map win rate. They had an incredible map pool. All their players were performing really well. They were all ranked within the top 15 of the HLTV top 20 for 2018. Probably that was a bit over generous, obviously, but the point was that they had 3 really strong players in Device, Dupree, and Magus, and then you had these luxury players in Xyp9x and Glaive who could also put up numbers and be able to contribute to the team in this really organized system, right, where everyone had their very specialized roles, Glaive being kind of the entry fragging in-game leader to set up someone like Dupree or set up Device's AWP, Magus being that kind of solo player who would be more active than Xyp9x, but he played a lot of solo roles like Connector on Overpass, for instance, or B Apartments on Mirage, different things like that where, he wouldn't always be the focal point, but he could still make plays on the edge of the map, do what he needed to do, be more of a mid to late round player if need be. Certain executes he could certainly still explode in and kind of be one of the guys trade fragging, but yeah, he could be that solo guy. And then Xyp9x, of course, was the other kind of peripheral role player, more of a support type feature, obviously really known for his clutching and his late round play. And they played the style of CS where, they had the perfect default for every single map that they played in their pool. They were the epitome of perfect CS in the sense that they could play pretty much any version of CS. Again, really good defaults, really good well-defined roles, good mid-round decision making, could call a lot of audibles from their default setups once they had map control. They could throw in faster pace execute so they could be dynamic. They could change up the pace. They also had really good cadence where they could kind of set up later rounds by what they would do in earlier rounds in the half to kind of condition their opponent and then really cause a change up. And that is something that they didn't maintain even when their era kind of came to an end. They started getting bad results. I kind of want to point that out, that they were able to maintain that. I think that was a great foundation to keep, so even if individual player form was suffering or there was ring rust or maybe some of the team play was a bit off or other teams were just really improving at an alarming rate and also building a lot of skill within their teams, like what EG and Liquid were basically doing throughout the year to kind of really increase their skill ceilings and kind of, get on the right track. Even Liquid was starting to get a bit more strategical with the trends coaching and with Nitro developing more and more as an in-game leader as 2018 passed and all the lessons he had learned. But they maintained that foundation as kind of still a really strong tactical team, still the strongest tactical team probably in many people's eyes. But we know that this era eventually came to an end, right? I really felt like where you noticed it most was probably ECS Season 7 Finals, where they lost to Furia. Or no, you could probably go back even further than that, maybe. Losing the finals to Ints at Blast Madrid was probably even kind of a marker because they didn't really struggle with Ints in the past, and they were literally on the verge of tying NIP's 32 map win streak on Nuke as, the longest map land streak of all time in CSGO, and then they lost Nuke to Ints in the grand finals of Madrid in a pretty big fashion and ultimately lost the whole series. And then you go to ECS Season 7 Finals, which is where I was really trying to allude to, and they lost to Furia in 2 different games. They lost the opening best of 1 on Nuke again to then losing a best of 3 to Furia, including a loss on Nuke. So it's you went from winning 31 Nuke games in a row and being on the verge of breaking a world record in CS to now losing the map 3 times in a row between Int and Furia, teams you normally never had trouble with. So these were some really, really scary signs. Then you go to the EPL finals And again, Liquid get the better of them. Not only that, though, they lost to Energy. Again, this is not a North American. I mean, they were constantly tearing it up. And now all of a sudden, not only are Liquid getting a head-to-head edge over you all of a sudden for 2019, but between this win and Alba Power Masters, but now even Energy's getting you. And so both those events, they placed top 6. And again, these are the first times that this team is placing outside of the top 4 ever since their first event together way back in early 2018. I think it was like a Starlighter event, or that was their first event with Majors where they placed top 8 there. Then from there, they were consistently at least placing top 4 for like 19, 20 events in a row, right? It's just kind of insane to see this fall. But then we see them have a bit of a recovery at Cologne, I guess you could say. They at least were able to place top 4 there. But the problem was they lost the vitality. This is a team that, certainly had a lot of skill, but they were having their own issues. They were in the process of transitioning out of the MBK lineup and bringing in Shocks. And so it was still really surprising to see them lose the vitality, especially the condition in which they lost. Like, they had this really close double overtime victory on Inferno, but then they lose like blowouts on Dust 2 and Overpass. And so it was really crazy to see. But then they kind of go away, right? It's kind of a pre-major break. They kind of go away for basically almost 2 months, right? Because they didn't start playing a Starlighter Berlin Major until really late August, and Cologne ended in very early July. So definitely a pretty extended break there. But this is where things pick back up. They win the Starlighter Berlin Major, and this is now their 3rd major victory as a lineup. This is incredible stuff. They were able to get revenge back on Energy and Liquid from the EPL finals. They also beat a pretty dangerous Crazy team. They ultimately won the finals against Avangar. And really, from this point forward, I'm not going to get to the nitty-gritty of all the rest of their games, but when you look at their events, they were able to make a finals of ESO in New York. They placed top 4 at Malmo. They won IM Beijing, and now they've won ECS Season 8 finals. The only real blemish on their record is Blast Copenhagen, which, again, these Blast events, they have like really weird formats, and so they're not really seen as competitive as many of the other like more elaborate formats that we see in kind of the top tournaments. And so it's hard to really draw too much from that. But granted, you could also take away some of their titles, because some of the titles I was talking about from their era, I think 3 of them were Blast events. So you got to do a little bit of give and take on that, right? It can help you, but it can also hurt you. So I guess the point is like, what's changed? I will say what didn't change is, again, their foundation, their tactics. Like, that is something that they were always able to maintain. But one thing that I think they did do was innovate a bit, particularly Vertigo, I think, is the biggest example of that. They never really needed to play Vertigo in the past, right? Teams typically didn't want to play it and would ban it. They didn't have to worry about it. They kind of just slotted it in for Cash, which used to be kind of their permaban. They were all really, really good on some of the other maps. The only real map that I think was a potential gap was Train, which we're going to talk about in a second. I mean, I think their Overpass did also get some mixed results there for a period. So you could say their Overpass was getting a bit shaky, their Train was a bit shaky, and then you didn't really know what their Vertigo was going to be because they hardly ever had to play it. So that was kind of some of the areas in the map pool. And then maybe even Nuke. Nuke got shaky, right? They had those 3 losses. They started going a little bit back and forth on it. And so really there was a lot of different angles that you could take here that were causing Astralis to fade whenever they were, at losing at ECS and EPL. It was like their map pool was draining, individual form was falling off, particularly on Glaive and Azipix, and other teams were just really pumped up. But again, we've seen this recovery, and I think a big piece of this recovery is the fact that they've been able to get their map pool back in shape. If you look at the last 3 months, their Nuke has skyrocketed back up again. They have a 12-3 record over the last 3 months on Nuke, so it seems like they've really gotten that back on track after those like 3 losses in a row to Ent and Furia, and just kind of being a bit dodgy on it there for a stretch. They've maintained their Dust 2 and their Inferno, so some of the staples of their map pool they've been able to remain very powerful on. They've integrated Vertigo in a very powerful way. Their only loss on Vertigo in the 7 matches they've played in the last 3 months was the overtime loss to Team Liquid in the grand finals here of ECS. If that's your biggest defeat in 3 months on this map is an overtime loss to Liquid, that's pretty fucking good. So the fact that they've been able to integrate Vertigo and they've shown innovation on it, I think is the biggest thing. Like the eye test, watching them play Liquid and other teams on Vertigo in recent times and seeing some of the stuff they were coming up with in earlier versions of the map, you could definitely tell they still had that fire about them. Like the crazy run boost they did out of T-spawn to the B stairs, or some of the way they were aggressing on A ramp on their CT side. You could really tell they were bringing something new to the table on this new map, and so that was a big piece to have Vertigo locked in. Then they've recovered their Train. In the last 3 months, they've won it all 6 times they've played it, including against some pretty decent teams. So the fact that they've been able to kind of take Train from a shaky state and actually make it kind of a map that they're can play. It's still one of their lesser played maps in comparison to, say, Nuke, Dust 2, Inferno, or Vertigo, but they do play it a fair amount and they're successful on it now. So you combine the fact that they've been able to rally their Train, they've been able to integrate Vertigo, and they've gotten their nuke back on track. And oh yeah, by the way, their overpass is still there. It's still not what it used to be, but they are capable of winning it. So yeah, their map pool is really shored up, I think is the point. So while maintaining their tactical foundation, they've now shored up their map pool, and you're seeing some of their players step up again. Like, Device has been a concept the whole time. This dude is a stud. Just incredible player. Even through some of their down periods, this guy was still getting his. You could probably say the same about Aegis also, to be fair. It was really like Dupree, who had a couple of off tournaments or a couple of off games where he just didn't really look himself compared to some of the bigger numbers you would see kind of during their era period. He still played pretty well, don't get me wrong. He wasn't like a burden, but he definitely did kind of have a little bit less impact than he used to have when he used to be like the best entry fragger in the world there for a while, it seemed. Glaive was the one that really tanked from like Blast Sao Paulo forward. Like, his numbers were completely different than what you were seeing throughout their era period. Really has recovered though with IEM Beijing in the ECS Season 8 finals. Like, he has really turned it around, and obviously when you already have like 3 star players in Dupree, Device, and Magus, the fact that you can also now have Glaive back as that luxury fragger who can also contribute to the overall fragging value of the team is great. Like, that was kind of the big factors of their era period, and to have that back, I think, has really been also big in their recovery on top of their tactical maintenance and their map pool recovery. And then Zipix has also been playing really well. He had a super strong Beijing effect. So I think that that's definitely something you have to really note. Another thing I can add to this that I almost forgot is the fact that they've been able to manage some of their head-to-head matchups. You know, again, earlier this year, Liquid started getting the better of them again, right? You talk about, ABA Power Masters, EPL Season 9. It seemed like Liquid were actually kind of finally reversing this rivalry after being dominated by Astralis for all of 2018. But now we've seen Astralis come back and beat Liquid in the ECS Season 8 finals. They were also able to beat Liquid in a best of 3 at ESL1 New York. They beat them at the major. And so, boom, like, that head-to-head matchup's back to Astralis' side of the court. Then, yeah, Evil Geniuses did give Astralis some trouble, right? Evil Geniuses did beat them, of course, at ESL1 New York in a best of 5, 3-1. Pretty dominant stuff. They also beat them 2-0 earlier on in New York. So, a best of 3 and a best of 5 victory for Evil Geniuses over Astralis at ESL1 New York just a couple of months ago. But guess what? Now that they've played each other here at ECS Season 8, it's Astralis walking away with the victory, and the 2 maps that they won were landslides, and they narrowly lost Nuke in that series. So it seems like they've been able to kind of figure out that problem. And EG are having their own issues with consistency right now. So at that point, when you look at kind of the international rankings of who's close, you have, again, Evil Geniuses are currently ranked number 2 in HLTV behind Astralis, who's number 1. They just won that head-to-head matchup, so they had that back on track. We already talked about the Liquid situation. They dumpstered 100 Thieves at IEM Beijing, which is the number 5 team in the world. So really, the only threats against them right now that you could potentially point out is, maybe, I mean, they haven't played Vitality again yet, but that team looks really shaky right now. FaZe, I'm not sure about yet still. Mousesports, not really sure about. So it just seems like there's not really an opponent out there that it seems to have like a guaranteed head-to-head edge anymore now that they've been able to take care of business against Evil Geniuses and Team Liquid. And even the Fnatic matchup, yeah, they lost to them at DreamHack Masters Malmo, I believe it was the big one, where they lost to them in the semifinals, if I'm not mistaken. And they were able to beat them, though, here at ECS Season 8. So again, it's like, yeah, they did drop this to Fnatic. Oh, they also beat them at the EPL group. I forgot to mention that as well. So yeah, like after the Malmo loss to Fnatic, they've beat them in the last 2 best of 3s they played them against on LAN. So the fact that everything else I've already talked about, and now they're starting to really kind of fix up some of these head-to-head issues they were having, I mean, it looks like they're going to be looking really, really powerful. Like, Liquid did look better at ECS, and there were chances for Liquid to 2-0 that series based on the fact that they were able to win the opening map on Vertigo in overtime, and that Nuke game was very, very close. There were chances for Liquid to win that. They had a lead for a bit in the second half, and there is a chance that if Liquid can actually keep up like this uptick in form we saw at ECS, they could still be a challenge for Astralis in a head-to-head matchup. But outside of that, man, I think Astralis are on pace to win 1 or 2 more events before the year's over. Like, they still have EPL Season 10 and, like, Bahrain for Blast. So they could easily get 2 more titles before the year's over and start establishing a new era again. So, again, just wanted to put this video out there talking about how Astralis have really just reassembled themselves. They are back to being a really strong team. They've done a lot of great things to get back on that pace, and it's been cool to watch because it makes it seem more interesting overall to have a bunch of really strong teams in the mix. So I hope you folks enjoyed this video. If you did, please subscribe for more content. Catch you next time.